Hello, Unchained family. This is Faith Unchained, where we teach you how to break the chains that bind you. With the lockdowns, social distancing, mandatory face masks, the BLM being shoved in our face by celebrities, sports, and the mainstream media, we've got serious division among our society, country, and around the world. Nothing we've been doing adds up or makes any sense. Why are mandates for lockdowns, social distancing, and face masks being enforced when even the experts don't agree on the science? Why are cities like Portland, Seattle, and Chicago still rioting, looting, and mass gathering, and it be okay, yet churches get shut down? They can't sing, and the water and electric are turned off because if they gather, it somehow spreads the virus. By now, it should be apparent to everyone that something is not right with the narrative that is being imposed on us. Faith Unchained is not a political channel, and I'm not here to change your political beliefs or your views, but to simply point out that something smells foul. Because now, more than ever, people are looking towards us as salt and light, and to be fed spiritually and shown how to walk in faith. However, we have people watching the mainstream media, buying into the mass fear and panic they are pushing. But this isn't a hopeless situation. It's just a world full of hopeless people. And this pandemic is putting that on full display. The narrative being spun is that if you don't comply with the lockdowns, social distancing, or mask mandates, that you're somehow selfish and don't care about others. Dr. Fauci is quoted as wearing a mask as a symbol of good behavior, but is the same person who stated that there was no reason to be walking around with a mask. But it doesn't stop there, because refusing to wear one can get you fined, jailed, faced with murder charges, or in some cases killed, because you were reported. Yet, while BLM protesters, if we want to call them that, who don't wear masks, social distance, and gather in mass mobs, don't contribute to the spread of the virus. They don't get jailed or charged with murder, theft, or property damage seen in Democratic-run cities like Portland, Seattle, and Chicago. And the Democratic leaders stand down police. They have their own private security everywhere they go, and they do nothing for the citizens as crime skyrockets because BLM calls for defunding the police. This narrative has also sown division in the church among Christians, as many quote Romans 13 by stating, "We are to submit to the government." So many have closed their churches for the rest of the year. States have claimed them non-essential, and people who remain open or don't social distance or wear masks are called fools and selfish. However, rioting, looting, murder, and destruction, protesting, has been labeled as essential and a right that should be protected. I'm sure a lot of the Germans thought that by reporting Jews or any Germans that helped them was essential too, and believed what they were doing was the right thing. And as you know, there were 11 million deaths because of evil propaganda put out there by their government as well. If you elect not to wear a mask, they guilt trip you and tell you that you are selfish and you don't care about anyone else and that you will spread the virus. Is this true? Did you know that the WHO themselves stated that asymptomatic spread of the coronavirus is very rare, but quickly retracted that statement a day later? But not only that, a study was done in May 2020 that clarifies the WHO's statement that the infectivity of asymptomatic carriers might be weak. So why then are studies like these being silenced and the narrative that people are selfish, don't care about others, and will spread the virus being pushed? Why are studies spanning a decade on the ineffectiveness of masks being censored by the government media outlets, social media, and doctors and being called fake or outdated? And why is there a surge of studies in 2020 that suddenly support the narrative of wearing a mask? Why are the government, mainstream media outlets, social media, and more doctors not speaking more to not only the ineffectiveness, but how masks can be a detriment to our health? Why didn't they tell us that all these mandates being made wasn't even from a peer-reviewed lab study, but based on a pseudoscientific study of 2 hairdressers in St. Louis? Why aren't they talking about the adverse effects of the lockdowns, social distancing, and what the masks have, not just on health, but social interaction, children's growth, by teaching them to fear everything, such as the virus and people, or the exponential increase in suicides, anxiety, and stress? The studies that have been done show consistently that masks are ineffective, from the N95 to surgical mask and the cloth mask, that none provide benefit or even protect you from contracting the virus. As for cloth masks, which everyone walks around with in the general public, a 2015 study showed not only is there a 97% penetration of particles and moisture retention, but along with reuse and poor filtration, increases the risk of infection. As we exhale, we breathe out waste and carbon dioxide, and it's all getting trapped in the mask and being breathed back in as it has nowhere to go. If that study is too outdated, then there was another study done on masks in May of 2020, conducted in prep for the development of guidelines by the WHO. This study had similar findings too, in that there's limited evidence that surgical masks prevent the spread of the virus, keeping in mind that doctors change and dispose of them every 2 hours, along with proper hygiene, and that improper use might increase infection instead by consistently touching or adjusting your mask and everything else you touch with your hands around you. Why is it then, when we look at actual research, we are being told to wear something that offers no benefit and will actually do us more harm than good? Doctors won't tell you to engage in more healthy activities such as exercise or physical activity because they themselves aren't educated on the benefits it provides or do it themselves. Instead, they offer quick fix solutions like prescription drugs and now wearing masks. Why? That's like someone buying a shake weight or a waist trainer believing they're actually exercising. Why isn't the government, media, and doctors telling people that exercise not only increases your immune function and the ability to fight off cold or viruses, cutting infectivity in half, but has other benefits to help decrease the risk of other chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, heart disease, many types of cancer, depression, anxiety, or dementia? So then, after hearing all this, who is more likely to transmit the virus? A person who solely wears a mask, or someone who doesn't wear a mask and exercises regularly? Think about that. As we've seen, doesn't that mean a person who wears a mask that is now at an increased risk for contracting a virus? Does that mean they don't care about themselves or anybody else? As a personal trainer myself, I had to mention this. This might be one reason doctors won't do this, but are there others? Are doctors being incentivized to keep quiet about what's really going on about COVID-19? Did you know many physicians have spoken out about being pressured by hospitals to list COVID-19 on death certificates? Why, you might ask? With typical pneumonia patients, if they are Medicare, hospitals make $5,000. If it's COVID-19 pneumonia, it's $13,000. And if it's COVID-19 pneumonia patients that ends up on a ventilator, it's $39,000. Not only that, Were hospitals truly as busy as they claimed to be during COVID-19 if doctors and nurses are seen doing well thought out coordinated dance videos all over TikTok? Doctors who we are supposed to trust can no longer be trusted. I'm not saying this is all doctors, but many. As we begin to question if all these measures being taken are really about our health and safety, because if that's the case, why aren't we talking about the increase in domestic violence around the world? Or the 800% spike in calls on the suicide hotline? Why aren't we talking about the fact that because the media has pumped so much fear propaganda, there is an increase in anxiety, stress, and suicides because of unemployment, isolation, and hopelessness? Or how the CDC themselves said suicides and drug overdoses have surpassed COVID deaths? Or better yet, why hasn't the news told us of any other serious side effects masks might have? That is, mask mouth, or another thing for gum disease and tooth decay. As we know, wearing masks over and over again turn them into the perfect petri dish breeding ground for bacteria through talking, coughing, and breathing. Still not convinced? Well, it's not my job to convince you, but to simply present you with evidence that's available if you seek it. Because more and more doesn't add up with everything we've seen and heard. And slowly but surely, we have more evidence that filters out. Evidence that should make you start questioning what is really going on and what people in power are really planning. It would be one thing if this was just one person saying this, but thousands of people are starting to speak out in our country and many more around the globe. The thing is, there are doctors speaking out, but people are too. And what they are saying should get you questioning everything you hear about COVID, from the number of cases and the number of deaths. There are reports all across the country of people who were never tested for the virus, but get a call days later saying they tested positive for coronavirus. There are other reports of people that didn't have coronavirus or had it months ago, then die of something else entirely, and it's listed as a coronavirus death. Then there are reports of labs that didn't report any negative test results and reported only positive numbers, listing positivity rates as high as 76, 98, and even 100%. It was only when local Fox 35 News in Florida started to investigate that labs started revealing their true numbers, like Orlando Health that reported 98% positivity, but it was actually 9.4. I haven't even mentioned Tim Sanger and his girlfriend, who had minor COVID symptoms and was asked by the county health department to lie about the severity of his symptoms to boost awareness for COVID. So much about this doesn't add up or make any sense as to why we are implementing such draconian measures for a virus with infection fatality rates ranging from 0.00% to 0.5%, with a median of 0.4%, giving us a mortality rate of 0.4% as reported by the CDC. Why is so much fear being spread about a virus that has a 99.7% survival rate for people 70 and under? Did you notice at the start of the pandemic, there was so much focus on the number of deaths, and when the death rate started to slow, every day since it shifted heavily to the number of cases? And why can't people start seeing that this madness is no longer about the health and safety of the people, but about politics? The Democrats, who are basically the poster child of the mask mandates and lockdowns, have used this to push their campaign. On October 13th, Biden said if he were in office that he would issue a nationwide mandate for masks for the next 3 months, both indoors and outdoors. 3 months from now, it happens to be November. On August 20th, Kamala Harris called the coronavirus racist when she said, quote, And while this virus touches us all, let's be honest, it's not an equal opportunity offender. Black, Latino, and indigenous people are suffering and dying disproportionately. This is not a coincidence. It is the effect of structural racism, of inequalities in education and technology, healthcare and housing, job security and transportation, the injustice in reproductive and maternal health care, and the excessive use of force by police, and in our broader criminal justice system. The virus has no eyes, and yet it knows exactly how we see each other and how we treat each other, end quote. Adding, quote, there is no cure for racism, and the people of the US have to work on finding a way to end racism, end quote. However, as a black man and personal trainer, and tying back into what I started saying earlier regarding exercise, many POCs don't exercise as common with 80% of our country. Plus, black people and their so-called Southern cooking are killing them, increasing the risk for chronic diseases like diabetes, coronary artery disease, heart disease, congestive heart failure, and many cancers. The virus isn't racist, but taking out people who were already killing themselves from lack of exercise and poor diets. Harris also stated on August 12th that the US only had 2 deaths from the Ebola outbreak during President Obama's term versus COVID-19 under President Trump's administration. On August 17th at the DNC, it was completely filled with blaming President Trump for, quote, botching the response to the coronavirus pandemic. During this time, there have been more articles pointing out President Trump's failure to confront the outbreak and how Republican leaders are losing the trust of their citizens for reopening too early, all while the Democrats are in favor of maintaining all of these restrictions. Still not enough for you? Then tell me, why are they pushing so hard for all of these ridiculous mandates? Tell me, why is it throughout the course of the pandemic, Democrats have been so keen on keeping schools closed? Tell me why there's been a massive effort to keep churches closed and have all these absurd restrictions placed on them. Mail-in voting, perhaps? In fact, on August 17th, Mrs. Faith Unchained, who is a Republican, by the way, got a text message asking for support to protect the mail-in voting the Republicans are trying to, quote, derail. A conspiracy? I think not. These ridiculous mandates are just the beginning of something even worse that is going to arrive in our near future. Because of fear and panic, people have given up their inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in exchange for safety and security, and only through forced compliance do we return to normal. These people are in power because, as a democracy, we place them there to serve and protect us. However, that power has been abused and corrupted for political gain. With these imposing mandates, we've given them the inch they've so desperately needed, so now they can stretch it a mile. How many lines are you going to allow them to cross before you say enough is enough? I promise you, this is much bigger than just Democrat versus Republican or the United States, but this is a coordinated effort by people in power all around the world. Examples of this is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who spent $20 million to fund Moderna, the company that is making the vaccine. Or the Rockefeller Foundation, who wrote out an extensive 54-page document detailing the epidemic taking place today back in 2010. Or the World Economic Forum, the UN, Event 201, or Agenda 2030. With the global push for mandatory vaccinations, Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz stated, quote, let me put it to you very clearly. You have no constitutional right to endanger the public and spread the disease, even if you disagree. You have no right not to be vaccinated, and if you refuse to be vaccinated, the state has the power to literally take you to a doctor's office and plunge a needle into your arm, end quote, which is quite scary to think about upon hearing. Luckily, we have people like Wesley J. Smith, Chair and Senior Fellow at the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism, to speak up on our behalf. First, he states, quote, thus the decision does not stand for the principle that the federal government or even state authorities have the power to force everyone to receive a vaccination because there is a health emergency. Rather, it found that the United States cannot impose a national legal standard on the locality unless mandated by the Constitution, which in this case, it wasn't, end quote. Continuing with his second point, quote, government cannot just pass any law at once because there is a health emergency. So, here is a question that must be answered in assessing Dershowitz's claim of a broad power of the government in the current circumstance. Is the COVID-19 pandemic such a great danger that it would be reasonable to secure the safety of the general public for the government to force everyone in the country to be vaccinated? It seems to me that the answer must be no, end quote. He continues by saying, quote, since we can identify the minority most at risk from COVID-19, is it reasonable to force everyone in the country to be vaccinated? Absolutely not. The government can deploy far less intrusive means to shield such people with limited quarantine orders and locking down nursing homes as two examples, end quote. He finished by saying, quote, finally, the pandemic has a widely divergent impact throughout the country. Would it be reasonable to force people in Montana to all be vaccinated because New York and New Jersey were hit by a catastrophe? Surely the answer has to be no, given that high-risk populations can be identified and isolated for their protection without materially impacting the freedom of the rest of society. I believe that state or federal laws requiring universal vaccination would be viewed by the courts as an unreasonable overreach of government power, end quote. Wesley's article explains that the government can't compel you to take the vaccine, but they are free to use persuasive means, in which we now turn to a Yale study to show you how they do this. The study tests different messages about vaccinating against COVID-19 once the vaccine becomes available. Participants are randomized to one of 12 arms, with one control arm and one baseline arm, comparing the reported willingness to get a COVID-19 vaccine at 3 and 6 months of it becoming available between the 10 intervention arms to the 2 control arms, describing things like personal freedom, which 1/15 of the sample was assigned to this intervention, which is a message about how COVID-19 is limiting people's personal freedom, and by working together to get enough people vaccinated, society can preserve its personal freedom. Or the social pressure of guilt, which 1/15 of the sample size was assigned to this message. The message is about the danger that COVID-19 presents to the health of one's family and community. The best way to protect them is by getting vaccinated, and society must work together to get enough people vaccinated. Then it asks the participants to imagine the guilt they would feel if they don't get vaccinated in spreading the disease. Or even the not bravery arm, in which 1/15 of the sample was assigned to this message, which describes how firefighters, doctors, and frontline medical workers are brave. Those who do not get vaccinated against COVID-19 are not brave. As you've seen, mass manipulation of this across the world. So, after hearing all this, how does it make sense that rioting has gone on for more than 80 days straight, but yet without penalty of all the looting, violence, destruction, it still continues on top of no mask, social distancing, or mass gathering mandates? Tell me, why is this nonsense called peaceful protest, but someone who elects not to wear a mask is seen as a deviant or criminal instead of these rioters? Many might not be familiar with their First Amendment rights, as the First Amendment of the United States Constitution protects the rights to freedom of religion and freedom of expression from government interference. It prohibits any laws that establish a national religion, impede the free exercise of religion, abridge the freedom of speech, infringe upon the freedom of the press, interfere with the right to peaceably assemble, or prohibit citizens from petitioning for a government redress of grievances. However, there is clearly mass hypocrisy seen in places like Portland, Seattle, and Chicago. Please tell me why states are abusing the 14th Amendment and enforcing laws that clearly infringe upon people's life, liberty, and property, but only upholding them for lawbreakers. All inalienable rights are endowed by the Creator, that is God, and not by government, and cannot be taken away as stated by our Declaration of Independence. As Abraham Lincoln stated in his Gettysburg Address, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. The Declaration is very clear that governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That is you and me. It seems that many of us are not aware of this, and that America was founded as a democratic republic and not a dictatorship, as it was at the time of Romans 13 under Emperor Tiberius Caesar, the second emperor of Rome. How long will it be before you finally say enough and finally stand for your rights? Because if you wait until there is a one world authoritarian order, then you have waited too late. Had the early Americans waited, we'd still be under British rule. Had slaves or abolitionists waited, we'd still be slaves. Had women waited, they'd have no voting rights. Had civil rights activists waited, POCs everywhere wouldn't be seen as equals among our less melanated brothers and sisters. So guys, that's it for today's video. This was a very long and tedious process, but I do hope that at least this message got to you and got you to start thinking. As usual, if you like what you saw, please leave any questions, comments, or suggestions about today's video or any future video that you want to see, and I'll do my best to get back to each and every one of you. And really quick, do you feel that this is a conspiracy or crazy talk? Or do you feel that everything we've seen and heard from our government and media makes what has been said here a compelling case? Please let me know your thoughts down below. And if you are new, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell beside that subscribe button. Like this video because each like gets us seen by more viewers like yourself, and share this video and our content with all of your friends and family. Whether you have a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or even an email, then you have the capability of sharing this content with everyone that you know. Guys, I say it all the time, we're blessed to go out to be blessings to other people. So that means don't hold this information in for yourself, because it's not just for you, as God desires everyone to hear his message, because he desires that everyone be saved. Always remember, it's the truth that sets you free, but it's the lie that keeps you in chains. Guys, this is Faith Unchained, where we teach you how to break the chains that bind you. And until next time, take care.